Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whichever part of the world and whatever time zone you're joining us from. Welcome. Welcome to the 2022 edition of the Black Consciousness Festival, where we're focusing on healing and reconnection. The Black Consciousness Festival is a global platform that connects people of African descent with each other by sharing and encouraging exchange through information, traditions, histories, intentions, traumas, celebrations, legacies, stories connecting to pride, power, and practice. Our inaugural year was in 2020, where we curated a month of conversations and activities around topics of Black consciousness. In 2021, we had a few events: a youth festival, a weekend of conversations on reparations, and in November, conversations on shift, as we explored the many ways in which we, as people of African descent, shared and rebirthed elements of ourselves. The recordings of all these conversations are available on our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com, and our YouTube channel. As you listen to the conversations, we encourage you to be kind to yourself. Pause, breathe consciously, move, and appreciate all that you are. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Enjoy.
Hello, good day, good evening, good afternoon, good night, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival 2022, where our theme is healing and reconnection. So it is my honor today to introduce this conversation and introduce the panel members. But what exactly is healing? Healing, according to most dictionaries that you look at, is about growing sound, getting well, or mending. As a verb, it means to bring to an end or conclusion as conflicts between people or groups, usually with the strong implication of restoring former amity, to settle or to reconcile. Today's conversation lead is Janelle Williams. So much could be said about Janelle, but we've known each other for many, many, many years. Janelle lives in the United States, in New York City, to be honest. And she's also one of the directors on the board of the festival. So welcome, Janelle. In addition to Janelle, we have Erica M.B. Ashton, Aisha Dabiq, and Ruth Osman, who are also going to be part of the conversation. And why are they part of the conversation? Because they would have been part of a recent study group, reading group, and reflection on the book Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. But first, before we get started, I'll hand over to Erica, who will lead us in our starting ritual.
Welcome. Good to be here. So I invite us into this moment to take a breath. Take a breath in deeply as we honor who we are. We honor our ancestors. We honor this moment where we can come together and share. Take a breath in as we claim our healing, which is there for us. And take another breath in as we breathe for the joy of it. Breathing slowly, breathing gently. And as we breathe, I invite us to bring our ancestors to mind, the ones we want to remember. And I invite us to say their names. I will start off saying the name of my parents, my mother, Vera Edwards Ashton, my father, Milton Augustine Aubrey Ashton. I'm giving all of the names. His mother, Ivy Ashton Harper, and her mother, Alma Ashton. My mother's mother, Brownie Edwards. I give thanks for them.
Mm,
Invite each of us to just take a moment to call to mind those ancestors we want to remember.
mm.
I'd
There's
like
so
to
many.
call. Okay, yeah. You go ahead.
Thank you. There's so many, but I'll call a few. Gertrude, Granville, Viola. There's so many. I have them in heart and mind.
Ashe.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'd like to call my dad, Rafi Muhammad Osman, my maternal grandmother, Dara Alexandra, my maternal grandfather, Hans Zebida, my dad's mom, Sarah Osman, and his father, Muhammad. Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you. Mm,
I would like to lovingly acknowledge both my paternal grandparents, George and Viola Rock.
mm,
Ash.
Ashe.
sure.
I would like to acknowledge George and Emily Agito, their children who are my aunts and uncles who've passed, Patsy, William, Norma, and my grandmother Shirley. I would also like to acknowledge on my maternal paternal side Selby Eiffel, Gertrude Dennis, and Cora Webb. Ashe.
Ashe. We give thanks for all of them because we know that they are with us, clearing that path for us.
Mm,
And I invite us again to just take one more breath, breathing in deeply and breathing out. Thank you. I hand over to Miss Janelle.
Thank you, Erica. That was an amazing experience. To just breathe deeply is a gift and a blessing. And to remember those that we hold dear is also a powerful blessing. So today we are going to really continue a conversation that was started some time ago. This group has been revisiting this amazing book time and time again. Just the other evening, we had a discussion and we said to ourselves, what are we doing? This is not for tonight. This is for Saturday. So it's okay. We're probably going to do that many, many more times, right? Whether we do it with each other or with other friends, family, and so on. And so we are honored today to have an audience, I guess, right? And we're going to share that experience with you. And I think I'm just going to jump right in and just ask anyone here to call out the name of the book and the author, and maybe talk a little bit or just define or describe how the author defines post-traumatic uh, uh, post-slavery uh, trauma. I
Okay.
think it's like three or four, right? Three or four
Yeah,
words or phrases that were used by the author.
sure. If you guys don't mind, I'll take that one. The book is called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. And it's by Dr. Joy DeGruy. Even though she says America's legacy, of course we understand that it's not only America; it's the wider African diaspora. The book really, the definition of post-traumatic slave syndrome is that it's a condition that exists when a population has experienced multi-generational trauma resulting from centuries of slavery and continues to experience oppression and institutionalized racism today. Added to this condition is a belief, whether real or imagined, that the benefits of the society in which they live are not accessible to them. That's the basic definition of what post traumatic slave syndrome is.
Thank you, Sean. Erica, maybe can you react to that and what that means in the context of your life and where you are located, and maybe mention where you're located as well?
Mhm. So I'm in Trinidad and Tobago, and I remembered when Sean sent out the request, about being part of this study group. I said yes because I figured I needed to know more and to understand more about the situation that we're in. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to get involved in this and to go a little deeper. Um, I don't know that I had been aware of that concept consciously. You know, sometimes we
Right.
know things, but you know that specific. I don't know that I was aware of it until we started this. Of
Okay.
course, you know about post-traumatic, what is it?
Stress.
Stress
Mhm.
disorder.
Mhm. Yes, PTSD.
So PTSD, we know about that, but the
Right.
PTSS, I think I became aware of this consciously as, you know, I read the book and we're going through it.
Mm.
And some
Okay.
of the things resonated. You know, it was like, oh my God, this is why, you know, this happens. This is why we are the way we are.
Yes.
Um, and for me, what it meant then was starting a thing, a process that I didn't know where it was going to go, but saying yes anyway.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then learning so much as we went along, encountering so much, so that I have to look at myself in a different kind of way because it highlighted, you know, and I do think I'm jumping, but it highlighted some of the innate biases we have
Yes.
against ourselves.
Mhm, mhm.
And that was so, you know, such a thing for me because it kind of hits you in the face
Yes.
and you have to sit with it, the
Mm.
feelings and knowing it's okay, you know, and breathing through it and
Yes.
talking about it and sharing. So, yeah,
Mhm, mhm. And
I'll
you're not
stop there for
jumping.
the while.
And you're not jumping. You're not jumping at all. Maybe Sean, I'll go back to you. I remember there's three or four characteristics, right,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this trauma.
Yes.
And Erica actually mentioned one of them just now. So maybe if you could just call it out specifically as the book describes it.
Right. So the book says that this syndrome, post-traumatic slave syndrome, is a pattern of behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is brought about by specific circumstances. And the circumstances that produce PTSS are basically multi-generational trauma and continued oppression, which is clear to all of us, right? Plus that real or imagined lack of access to things that we want. You know, whether it's the house, whether it's a good job, whether it's, you know, opportunities to do the things that we want. What is the resulting pattern of behavior? She names three key things that are part of post-traumatic slave syndrome. One is vacant esteem. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the lack of a really positive, strong, nurturing self-esteem in a person's life, a person of African descent. The second is ever-present anger, which is something that is very, very relevant to me because it's something that I struggle with, and I think a lot of black men, I can't speak for black women because I'm not a woman, but black men in particular struggle with that ever-present anger a lot. And the third thing is racist socialization, which is how the entire system in which we live, from the media to the education system to everything, is
Mm-hmm.
designed to basically convince us and to teach us that yeah, anything connected to Africa is not good, and
Mm.
we should not embrace it.
Right. Thank you, Sean. So
Mhm.
maybe we could pick apart those three pieces and then
Mhm.
maybe talk a little bit about identity. So we have vacant esteem. Whoa, what is vacant esteem? Maybe Ruth or Aisha, what do you hear or what is your understanding of it based on reading the book and your own interpretation of what is vacant esteem?
Alex, you want to take this one?
Sure.
Okay. To me, I think it has to do with being directionless,
Mm,
not having a firm sense of self, a bit of fickleness, not being rooted in anything meaningful that can sustain one. That's my interpretation. And
Mhm.
so that would manifest in a number of really negative, pervasive ways in one's life. And it would, of course, impact
mm,
relationships negatively.
mm.
And the
And
thing about it is, sorry?
No. Go ahead, please.
And it's to me it's insidious because it presents itself in very tricky ways. So sometimes it's very obvious, it's obvious that somebody is coping with vacant self-esteem or has self-esteem issues. But then in other instances, it's like beneath the surface. So would require one to go very deep and do a lot of introspection, or probably look for patterns in their life that would point to that. Because many of us are able to mask vacant self-esteem through education and access and what have you. So that's my take on it.
Okay.
I wanted to add one thing to what Aisha said. Vacant self-esteem, and I guess all self-esteem, is about value and worth, right? It's about how we value ourselves. And healthy self-esteem is really the result of an accurate and honest assessment of our value, right? And how do you accurately and honestly assess your value in a system which is constantly designed to tell you that you're not worth anything, right? So that's one of the interesting parts about vacant self-esteem.
Okay. And then also that, your self-esteem could be based on what you have or what you don't have, what you have access to or don't have access to, which could mean that you're worthless if you don't have access, right? But if you're in a system that creates barriers to access to specific things, then it's really more about that system and what it's creating and not your value, right? So that's vacant self-esteem. But what was the second one? No, the third one was the racial socialization.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what racial socialization, what does it look like? How does it demonstrate itself? And anyone could pick up on that one, Ruth, or anyone could pick up on that one.
So racial socialization, like Shonda said, if you belong to a society or system that tells you that you're not worth anything, right? Racial socialization occurs when you take on board the belief that this is the way the society is structured. It's structured along racial lines, along the lines of race. There is value attributed to these various groups. And when you buy into that whole dogma or that whole ideology that this is who we are as a people versus this is who they are as a people, and there is inherent value in them versus us. So it's and like I should have said as well, I suppose that's why it's CPSS, right? I think all of these things tend to go pretty deep. They go into our psyche. They dig into, the core of
Right.
of who we are, and so it's not like the other symptoms. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it is, right? So when we were discussing the book, as a group, for example, we would have said things like we grew up in the Caribbean hearing about color and about, the lighter you are, the more value you have, right? Because the closer you are to that end of the spectrum, right? Where there
Right.
is inherent value in who you are, or the texture here. And you hear people talking about it. You would have heard grandmothers, mothers, schoolmates. Um, so there's so many ways in which it shows up. Casual conversations. Your granny say, "Don't bring no something to me here." Right? You had a marry lighter because the generation that follow need to kind of
Right.
and yeah. So it's said in joke. It's said seriously. It shows up in the way we feel about ourselves as individuals. So that's racial socialization. The way in which we are socialized to see race, and more importantly, to place inherent value on race. Yeah, that was what I took from it.
No, thank you, Ruth. I mean, you summed it up
Yeah.
really well. Very, very well. Our socialization from birth, right, straight
Mm-hmm.
into adulthood, and even as we age, is very racialized, right? It's based on these man-made sort of categories and these constructs that were created, and how do we feel about that construct, right? And what does that construct look like? Oh, well, it's some boxes, right? Black or African American, Hispanic or Spanish speaking, white. We have all these different categories, Asian and Pacific Islander. We see them on the various forms that we complete, whether it is in academia or in the job market, etc. What do we think about that construct and what it's based on? Or does the book explore what that construct is based on?
Well, I wanted to. There's something I saw on Instagram recently, a short clip where I forget the guy's name, but he was saying that if all of the white people on the world were put on a spaceship and sent out to space, and it was just people of color left, white
Mm,
supremacy would continue
Mm-hmm.
because it exists in us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about that in the book. She talks about, that in essence, we've been socialized to be something akin to white racists. We, black people,
Mm-hmm.
have been socialized to be equal to white racists, which is, it's mind boggling to think about that. Many of us have adopted the attitudes and views of white racist America or white racist people in our own given spaces, right? We see ourselves and our community through those white lens. So the work, yeah, it's crazy. It's a
yeah.
psychological kind of thing.
I mean, it really is. I mean, and the reality is that in order to be racist, you need to have power, right? And that power it needs prejudice. So the power and the prejudice is what allows racism or gives racism life, right? And so to think that people of color can take on the prejudice thought,
Mm-hmm.
or understanding, right? But without that power, we can't really be racist, but we can definitely apply those prejudicial
Yeah,
uh, ideologies
yeah,
and categorizations,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
But to
oppressive.
make it worse, to know, there's a line in her book where she says, "We both we mold ourselves to accommodate prejudice, white prejudice,
Mhm.
and we endeavor to adopt their standards. So we work
Mm-hmm.
really hard to put ourselves into a box, the box that they've created, and then we aspire to be like them, which is
Mhm.
it's a double standard, which is crazy.
I'm wondering, Aisha, you didn't mention earlier, please, if you could mention where you're located and if you could maybe describe how you think this demonstrates itself in the work that you've done in the past or present.
Well, I'm coming from Trinidad and Tobago, and this framework of racial socialization, it is to me overt in the school spaces and in the education system in Trinidad and Tobago. To me, it's blatant, or maybe because I was a teacher,
Okay.
it was obvious to me, and then the type of schools I was at as well, where I believe that children were not seen as individuals with needs and hopes and desires, but the schools I was at were actually run like factories where you just see them as items on a conveyor belt, that you have so much time with them and you just move them along. To me, that is evidence of racial socialization. You're objectifying people, you're not acknowledging their humanness.
Mm,
It's everywhere, but of course, because I was a teacher for so long, I had to face my shortcomings as well and how I was contributing to this unfortunate system, many times out of ignorance, you know, and it's really the book that really got me to really delve deeper into the ways we are uphold systems, even with the best of intentions, even
Right.
thinking, yeah, well, yes, our intentions are good. The way we uphold systems that are really destructive.
Mm.
So,
So
yeah.
dig a little deeper with that. How does that demonstrate itself? For example, what does it look like? If we had to close our eyes and visualize it, what could it look like?
Okay, well, I always taught at mixed schools, and something that struck me very early on was that a lot of the young black men, because the schools were predominantly Afro Trinidadian, right? The schools that I was at, they felt very overlooked, and that manifested itself in a lot of anger, a lot
Mm,
of outbursts, and they also had a problem finding the right words to assert themselves and to express their hurt or their feelings of frustration. So that stood out for me very early on. With the girls, that was
mm,
prevalent as well. However, I felt it manifested itself in a different way where they felt, they were very attached, very preoccupied with their physical appearance, a lot of them. And, you know, they wouldn't
mm.
have books, but they would pay a lot of attention to their weaves and that sort of thing, and their hair. And they
Okay.
would come through with gel in their book bag and the toothbrush to fix and
Okay.
so, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So some folks may ask, well, where do we go from here? Okay, we know this. We got it. We understand the symptoms and what this trauma looks like. But then what? Right? So I guess maybe to some extent, maybe the solution or part of the solution is the restoration of our humanity. And, so maybe let's talk a little bit about identity. What is identity? And where
And
can healing come from when we explore identity and humanity in that context?
Janelle, I wanted to say, as you said,
Mm,
the restoration. I
yes.
want to add the reclamation,
Mm,
because part of the thing I think a lot of in this context is that we seem to be waiting for someone to tell us it's okay to reclaim who we are. And I'm saying,
okay.
we've been given something which we know is not working for us.
Okay.
We've taken on a value system which does not speak to us. It doesn't resonate. There's,
Mhm.
that this thing that we feel and we know intuitively. Yeah. So
Yeah.
part of the thing for me is reclaiming that thing, getting quiet enough, and I keep saying this, to know, because some of us know, and it isn't 100% there, because I recognize that not everybody will be there.
Right.
But I think enough of us know, we feel something, we know it's not right. We
Mm,
know that, this thing that we're on is basically killing us and keeping us in a space because we can't keep up.
right.
Because we so into the system, the markers shift on us all the time. And we see it and we continue without taking responsibility for ourselves, for who we are, for our families. I look at a simple thing, how we now, bring our children up. Before, children had chores. And giving children chores, as we would know, builds that sense of responsibility. They know they're not here, as one person said the other day in something I listened to. You're not here just to breathe oxygen. There are
Yes.
things you have to do. And
Yes.
that comes through giving age appropriate chores,
Yes.
commending children when they've done them well, and helping them.
Correct.
But there's a thing where we feel now that, we've progressed, whatever that is. And therefore, because some of us had to do chores, we had it hard. Our
Mm.
children get ease up, so we don't give them chores. So they grow up thinking they don't have to do anything, they don't have to contribute, they just have to show up, which I
Yes.
think is part of the trauma that comes through, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So that in itself is a problem,
Right.
you know, in terms of how we raise, how we value, how we give them that sense of esteem,
Right.
that sense of self, because we value you as a child, yes, but you're doing all of these things and we value those things, we commend you. And we also say, when you're not doing so good, we will tell you. Because I think that's the other part of it, that we want to be friends with them, we want to be okay, that we don't seem to be able or to feel that there's
Mm.
a responsibility for us to create the environment, so we have to shape. There's some
And
unpopular things which we have to do.
yeah, no, thank you so much, Erica. You touched on so many different things there that we can relate and connect to those three pieces that Sean described, right? So the racial socialization, the empty esteem, right? And all of that impacts the way we discipline children or affirm them or not affirm them, right? How much we guide them towards an understanding of their own self, accepting responsibility, holding themselves accountable, right? Um, and just learning how to sit in a quiet space and self examine, right? So, all of that is important. Now, some folks may say, okay, well, what are you trying to apply this, try to apply these three things, or you're trying to apply this book to everything? Well, in essence, that's what we're talking about, right? Is how do we unpack these pieces and close our eyes, sit with it, and then open our eyes and be able to see how it's impacting us, right? When we talked the other night, we talked about an exaggerated existence, right? And then Ruth came on and she said, well, no, let's look at it a slightly different, right? So maybe we can revisit that now, right? When, you see, this individual that is dressed a certain way or they may be behaving in a certain way and it just seems egregious, but it's because of the vacant self-esteem, right? That says, I need to be seen. So I need to have, let's say, the longest blonde hair, or I need to have the longest nails, or I need to have on a white shirt, or white pants, gold shoes. Like I just need to be out of sorts in the moment. And we know that, how you dress and so on is self-expression. But there are times when it just seems out of pocket, right? I don't know how else to put it, right? And that's a way of maybe saying, you know what, I need you to see me. And I have to do all of this for you to see me. I have to come out of my natural self, or, there's parts of my face or whatever that I need to embellish literally for you to see me. Um, and then Ruth had an opposing point. Were you going to say something, Sean?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something that we were talking about before,
Uh-huh.
that Dr. Joy DeGruy highlights in the book, that there's a difference between racist socialization, which is the system that we are all raised under, and racial socialization. Now, racist socialization is the one that teaches us that white is always better and that we are inferior, right? But
Okay.
racial socialization is different. And she's proposing that racial socialization is the response to
Mm.
racist socialization, right?
Wow. Okay.
And what's the difference between the two is that racial socialization is about us as adults telling our children the truth about the system that they live in, preparing them to thrive in this real society that they live in, and replacing racist socialization, right? And that the racial socialization is the process whereby we come to know our strengths,
Mm.
understand the world in which we live in, and to position ourselves to thrive. So it's really being strategic about how we tell the truth to our children about the world that they live in, how we highlight the strengths that they have, and how we give them the tools to then thrive in an environment that's not designed for them to thrive.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that
And
clarification.
and the question I always ask when I hear about thriving in this environment, I bring it up all the time, is why do we really want to thrive in an environment which is not for us? We don't have to answer, but it's something I always put out there, because again, we operating for me within the confines, within a system which has been given to us. And we are not even, questioning that.
Mm.
So because to me, the thriving in a system which is broken, which is traumatic, is part of our trauma. And so therefore, why do we want to continue in it? Why do we even think, we need to
Ruth,
value ourselves within that? To be
Ruth, I think
seen.
Erica is talking about marinage there, right?
She is talking about Marinette, and I love it. Can I add to that? Can I
Of
add to
course.
Please
that?
do.
Now, Erica is actually a mentor to me. So Erica knows my personal struggle with what she's saying, right? But because it's one thing to say you want to get out of the system. It's the next thing to actually do it. It's there's a level of discomfort, and for me personally, a great amount of fear. About family and responsibility. But we're not going to talk about that. Let me just say though that it's so important to think about that as a thing that can actually be done, even more so now because the system is falling apart. Anybody with two eyes could see that the system that we've been raised in and socialized to want to reach the highest levels of isn't even serving the elites as well as its youth. It is falling apart. The cracks are showing. The people that we are aspiring to be like are unhappy and miserable in their rich mansions and committing suicide and beating up their wives and having identity issues. It's capitalism is falling apart. Western civilization has. I am one of the people who firmly believe that it has peaked and it is on the on the downward trajectory. And so even more so now at this phase of human history, why do we want to jump to join a plane that's falling, that's gonna
Yeah,
crash?
Well, here's
yeah,
the
You
thing,
know,
right? And let's think about a quick analogy, and I want us to go back to this exaggerated existence and the not
yes,
opposing, the alternative view that Ruth, I know you have about that. If you are a driver, right, you'll practically drive anywhere, right? But if when you're learning, you will drive, right? But you will kind of go anywhere you're told to go because you're learning. So when the
right.
instructor says turn right, you turn right, turn left, you turn left. But when you're a driver, sometimes you'll say, listen, I don't want any backseat drivers in this car with me. Why? Because you know how to drive. Even
yeah.
when you're lost, you will still continue. You don't pull aside, you don't stop and ask everyone in the
Nope.
vehicle where to go. You just keep going, right?
Because you're never lost.
Because you're never lost. You never lost. So I don't know if that analogy helped,
I love that. I love that.
but
Yeah,
but
yeah. Because
you're in the
what that
system.
what that does is it teaches us patience, right? With ourselves and with others.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
I love that.
And one of the things
Yeah.
I want to add to what Ruth is saying about the marinage, and I think I've said this before,
Mm.
our Rastafarian brothers and sisters has shown us, they've shown us the way how to get out of the system. But again, I think part of it is our own othering and our own not owning who we are and how this thing looks. Because I think that's a perfect case. There are problems, that they've encountered, but they've shown us a way in terms of how we can, escape, not escape, but move away from, because escape sounds as if you're running from something, but deliberately make a choice to move away from
Mm.
and thrive.
Right. Right.
But I
But
think again for us is looking at how we see them and what they bring. That's a whole other conversation.
right.
Mhm.
Right. But it's still on this conversation, which is understanding who you are, right? And identity. So when we hear someone say, well, describe who you are, right? Or what is your identity? What does that even mean? I think Aisha, you had mentioned you had a description and some thoughts on that, right?
Well, identity for me is very vast, and I cannot really narrow it down to just the roles that culture and society or family perhaps, want me to play, or the expectations that the group I was born into or the culture I was born into. I can't just be that manifestation only. So identity, therefore, is something that is rooted in an infinite source. So I believe that we all have access to this source and we can all tap into it. And it is therefore indestructible, it is timeless, it is unfailing.
Mm.
And because of its nature, it can never it can never fail us. It is always available to us. And I could get really abstract here, and I hope I'm not sounding abstract, but I really
No,
believe
please go ahead.
that as much as we must acknowledge that, yes, we are Black and we have ancestors who went through this horrific experience of enslavement, we must also, our interrogation of what that meant must also go deeper and acknowledge that for them to survive the horrors of that experience, they had to go beyond their humanness
Mm.
and therefore tap into something timeless to sustain them.
Mm.
Because to me, that's the only way they could have endured it and, you know, created offspring.
Right, right. And that's where their humanity really did lie in that place. What that source, whatever they were tapping into, that's what helped to keep their humanity intact, right?
Yeah.
Because there's your mind, there's your gut, and your heart. And when those three things are intact, your humanity stays intact. You need all three of them, right? Um, so I just wonder where do we go from here, right? We can explore our identity, we can explore how others see us versus how we see ourselves, right? Does the author say anything about that? How does she explore that? How we see ourselves versus how others categorize and see us.
She has a whole chapter on that. But when you say how we see ourselves, is that the whole notion of race, or
Wherever you want to take it. I mean, we usually go to race, right? That's where the socialization comes in too, right?
yeah?
That we always see ourselves first from the perspective of these boxes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So race always comes to mind. But if we see ourselves as human beings,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
then what
and
do we see?
divine elements too, because I think if we tap into that spirituality, and I'm not talking religion here, but that spirituality which says that we are divine spirits, we are divinity in operation. If we know that, if we feel that, we can then pass that on to our children. So we understand that, as Aisha is saying, there's something bigger,
Mhm.
something ineffable, something which our ancestors knew because they tapped into that. They
Right.
tapped into that thing that we seem to feel in this construct we have been given that it's not important, it's an add on. And that is not an integral part of who you are, of your life, of the rituals that they would do to keep them going, to keep them buoyant, to keep them alive, so that we are here because of that. And I think understanding that spirituality, that thing which they know that they tapped into, I think that's important for us in growing and moving forward, in healing, starting to heal.
Well,
Healing.
yeah, one of the sorry, Janelle.
No,
Um,
no, go ahead, Sean.
one of the key things she talks about from the very beginning, from the start of the book, is what you mentioned about reclaiming our humanity, right? And she's saying that all African cultures, and of course our um, diasporic cultures, which come out of African cultures, she mentions three things that are key to them, but one being absolutely essential, and which is about relationship and about the networks that we have and the communities and families that we're a part of, which are essential to understanding in the first place who we are, understanding issues of power, issues of love, issues of healing. All of those things come out of the relationships that we have, right, and how we treat with those relationships. The second thing she talks about is attuning ourselves to the temporal rhythms that Erica talked about in terms of spirituality. And the third is then how do we then communicate that to the next generations, right? And that's about how we use symbolic imagery, the storytelling that we do, the mass that we do, the rituals, all those things are, how we take what we understand about the world and understand about life and then create a symbolic system to teach others about it. And at the beginning of the book, I don't know if you all remember, she uses the phrase Kaserian Injera, which I think is it from Mali? Um, which is they don't use the phrase "How are you" when one person meets another. They use that phrase Kaserian Injera, which translates to "How are the children?"
Mm.
Right? Because they understand that if the children are not okay, then nobody is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we ask how are the children and you say the children are good, then we're all good, right? Because
Yes,
the children are fine.
yes, yes. So I know we have a time limitation, so maybe we can just do a check-in on what have we left out. Oh my gosh, we could probably talk for another 3 hours, right? But what have we left
We
out?
didn't talk about the anger.
Oh gosh,
Oh
the
yes,
anger,
the ever-present anger. Yes, that's
ever-present
important.
anger. That is definitely a thing, right? It's almost as if, you know, in the blink of an eye, we can be in a very angry, even if you want to call a violent or even vile place. But I also want to honor the fact that we have a right to be angry.
Yes,
And
Yes.
definitely, definitely.
so I don't think it's necessarily offensive if someone tells me that I'm angry, right?
Mhm,
You know, if you tell me I'm angry, then I'll say, well, why? Why do you think I'm angry?
mhm,
Right?
mhm.
So yes, being sort of ready, at the snap of a finger to, I have something to tell you, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Is understandable.
yeah,
However, right, given our ability to tap into some of the sources, right, that Erica and Aisha, whether it be rituals, whether it be community, whether it be each other, whether it be music, dance, our ability to
Mm-hmm.
do that also at the
yeah,
snap of a finger
Mm-hmm.
is a
yeah,
reason why we're able to continue,
yeah,
right? So we have to
Mm-hmm.
honor that ability within ourselves. Not everyone can do that. It's like this magic ability that we
yeah.
have. But if we could talk about that or anything else, what else have we missed? Ruth, check us. What did we miss? Give us something we
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I'm thinking we've covered a lot of the bases. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think.
missed.
Um,
Or anyone.
maybe
Aisha,
I want to 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 go off. Yeah, I just want to go off on the anger a little bit. One of the things that she
okay.
said about the anger, um,
Hmm.
um, and while you're right, it is justified. More often than not, it's because it's systemic oppression, right?
Hmm.
Um, but what she also said was that in a system that is oppressive like that, anger, when it's expressed in a particular way, does not always serve the best interest of the person
Yes.
experiencing peer pressure. And so what I got from that, from some of the examples she used and some of the things she said around that issue of anger, wasn't that anger isn't justified, but that as Black people, it serves our best interest to be able to do that dance
Mm.
that we do so well, to be agile in the moment, and to be agile in the moment. I think we do have to have in our arsenal those things that Eric and Aisha talked about and that you mentioned just now. We have to have in our arsenal the ability to access ancestors, the ability to think outside the box, the ability to dig deep and search for and pull out other types of energy, the rituals that we do, the idea that time isn't linear, it's organic and it flows. I think those the communities, the network, the people we can call up, you know. Um, so I just want to bring that other aspect to that anger discussion. The idea that yes, it's there and it serves a purpose. Don't get tired. Angry people get stuff done, right? Um, but at the same time, it helps to have a full arsenal at your disposal, that
Yeah.
you then choose. You say, oh, in this situation, it doesn't make sense to blow up. You know what I mean? In this
Yeah.
situation, it does. And I can pull from those tools because I have all these things available to me.
Yeah.
I just
Right.
wanted to bring that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And
Thank you.
and as you're saying that, I remember the discussion around Ogun. Ogun has two swords, one to cut the way and one to dig up, to till the soil so things could grow. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, strategy. Because most times we think it's just about the fight, right? But the fight is
Mhm.
never, as Ruth saying, just the fight. There has to be some strategy
Yeah.
around it. So how you're using your tools, that's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like at times when I'm angered, it's actually a liberating moment, right? Because there's
Yeah.
something there that needs to be purged, right? But it's what do I do with that energy, right? And there's times when you want to lash out, you want to yell, you want to scream, you want to protest, you want to write letters, you want to, right? Hit and fight. And what I'm learning to do is to do things that will heal me
Yeah.
first and foremost, right? And then figure out how to, I guess, take an action that will help to reduce the amount of triggering I will have, right? Because I can't stop being angry, right? But every time something does happen that can cause it or to make me feel like, oh, I can't believe this is happening right now. Really? We still doing this in 2022? Seriously? When we look at the world and we look at our governments, we look at the laws of the land, we look at the barriers that are just, laying one on top of each other, it makes you want to holler and scream. But again, heal myself first, right? And healing is progressive. It's not a one-time thing and it's not a point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, okay, what do I now do so that the next time I see this ridiculous ad on TV, you know, I will act in a way that can reduce the number of those type of ads. And that's where the Black Consciousness Festival really comes in, is having these conversations. These conversations is an opportunity for that, because someone's going to hear this and it might bring healing to them as well and cause them to behave differently in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the three things that we talked about are all so interconnected because,
Yeah.
at the root of anger is this feeling of being disrespected,
Yeah.
Right.
right? Of your personal dignity not being upheld or acknowledged and that kind of stuff. And so we've developed, as Black people, a kind of hypersensitivity to that disrespect.
Mhm.
It happens so often, and it's just, as you rightfully said, it's like, really? Again? Like,
Right.
is this really happening? But
Mhm.
Ruth kind of underscored it, and it was in the book about us choosing when and where um, to allow that anger to manifest itself. Because what that anger could possibly just continue to do is keep us in that cycle of victimization.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm. Especially if the main perpetrator is continuing the act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And Dr. DeGroot she called it taking control of our inner world, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. It's about,
Yes.
because she said, there's a lot to be angry about, yes, but that anger also, which is something that we don't talk a lot about, but was mentioned in a conversation yesterday about our health as Black people. That anger
Mhm.
has physiological repercussions, right? The high blood
Mhm.
pressure, the
Absolutely.
diabetes, the strokes, all those things are manifestations of stress that are connected to anger. So it's not
Mhm.
only emotional and psychological, it also literally kills us.
Right?
Mhm.
And not only anger, but also even deep grief,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just the
Yes.
stress, the hopelessness,
Mhm.
um, the vacant self-esteem, all of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of those sort of negative things, those things that don't bring positivity, don't bring light, don't bring growth.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, I don't know. Anything
Mhm.
else we're missing? I think we just have a few minutes
Yeah.
left.
I
Um,
think one of the things I'm thinking about is in that community, when we look at our community, it is also, which I think was interesting in terms of the exercises with it, being honest about who you have in your community.
okay.
Because a lot of times we think we have a big community, but when you look at it, everybody is not on the same page and everybody is not ready. It's like how you would say
Mhm.
it's not everybody you would take a child with because they're not capable. So that there's an honesty that is required around our communities, around some of the behavior, some of the things we see, and making a
Yes.
decision around that, not excluding people, but knowing that there'll be a way where you have to corral, manage something because
Right.
we are sharing something new, something different.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
until you can exhibit the right, I say in quote unquote, behaviors, we then have to treat you differently.
Yeah.
Hmm. No, no, you're
Yeah.
right. You're right. I remember having a conversation with someone in a school, a top level administrator, and having to tell her that I didn't trust her. And I had to say,
Mm,
and I said it very pleasantly because I wanted a pleasant outcome, right?
mhm,
So I was angered. But in that moment, I had to do one of Erica's breathing exercises, right? I had to do that. And I had to let her know why I didn't trust her. I gave an examples of why I didn't trust her. And I literally said to her, I said, I'm giving myself permission to say this to you because it's good for me. It's going
mhm,
to bring me comfort and healing, but it's not intended to necessarily hurt you. But I need you to shift a little bit because I don't want you to keep doing this to me or to my son. Right. And so, how do we have those conversations? Again, I think it comes back to identity, right? And really understanding who we are and understanding
mhm,
who came before us and not just, oh, they had a hard time, life was rough, or this journey, oh.
Hmm.
No, but their resilience. And I want to honor their resilience by tapping into it and bring it into the spaces where I am. So regardless of what's going on, I'm going to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Ah,
I
this,
vote.
I love that. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Aisha.
mhm,
Thank you, John. I love that you raised that, Janelle, because as a parent, there have been a few instances, thankfully not many, where on my children's behalf, I've had to assert myself.
mhm,
And if I did it out of anger, I had to be very strategic, as Erica said, you know, because their reputation on the line, and I don't want to make things bad for them in the environment, in their school environment, and that sort of thing. And then my reputation on the line. So I had to be very calm, choose the right words, But in the moment, that is what it was about, healing and ensuring that I left the conversation with the individual knowing it's nothing personal. But this has to be said. I'm not going to carry this burden alone, and I'm not venting.
Mm.
You must acknowledge that what happened to cause this conversation was unfortunate, and we must do all in our power for this not to repeat itself.
Mm.
You know?
Yes.
Connected to what both Chanel and Aisha said. There are three things that I want us to that I want to underscore that she talks about in her chapter about healing, right?
Okay.
And Erica kind of alluded to it before. One is about modeling, that we have to, for our children and for younger generations, model the kinds of behaviors that are healthy and positive, right? Because we could talk from now till thy kingdom come. They follow what they see us do, right? More than what we tell them, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is about leadership, right? And as about, if we are honest with ourselves, leadership in Black communities and Black leadership in general is not at its peak. Is not the best kinds of leadership, and we really have, as a people, have to focus on the kinds of leadership that we provide to each other in our various communities, whether it's in education and politics and community and faith, whatever. We have to establish stronger leadership. And the last thing connected to what Ira was talking about, identity, has to do with our narratives and how we tell our stories, right? And she talks about in the book creating family narratives that really free us and are redemptive. And she gives an example of a psychologist who was working with children, and she mentioned that the children who knew a lot about their families tended to do better when they face challenges, right? And the single most important thing that you can do for your family, maybe the simplest of all, which is to develop a strong family narrative. If children don't understand, and Jenna was talking about that, right? If children don't understand the families that they came from, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is all part of the narrative, then they're like grass in the wind that will get pushed about. But if they're firmly rooted in their family stories, when the breezes blow, they will withstand it.
Yes. I love that. So maybe we can touch and agree that we have to start asking a different question. So Ruth, when I meet you in person, before I say, how are you? I'm
Yeah.
going to say, how's the family? How are the children in the family? So how are the children next door? Is that okay, Ruth?
That's quite okay. That's going to be a really good reminder of what's important. Thank you. Thank you, Janelle.
You're
I
welcome.
look forward to it. I look forward to the time when I see you face to face and we get to ask each other those questions.
So maybe we can touch and agree on that. So I have Ruth, Aisha, yeah, we'll ask that. We have a new question to start asking.
How is the family?
How's the family? How are the
And
children?
then how are you being?
Yes.
How are you being?
How are you being?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yes.
wanted to correct. I had said Mali before, but that phrase comes from the Maasai. The Maasai.
The Maasai. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Awesome.
know we're wrapping up, Janelle, but one other thing I want to put on the table that's
Of
important
course.
for us:
Mm-hmm.
nutrition,
Mm,
nutrition, movement. You
mm.
know, those things are so critical for us that, I suppose that's another conversation.
Yes.
What we eating, what we growing, what we
One
giving
that
our
they talked about this
children.
morning, yeah.
We talked about that this morning, but nutrition is so important for us.
Mm.
Eating the foods that we know are good for us as people of African descent, because there are some things we know that's good for us.
Yes.
Tapping into those things, remembering.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's a part of keeping your humanity intact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
culture. And what is culture?
Mm-hmm.
It's the language, it's the food, it's music,
Mm-hmm.
it's all of that, right?
All of that.
So,
How much time do you have? Calm down.
so
Because you're always waiting, and I'm like, what's going on here? I want to say like one thing. Can I say
I,
one thing?
I didn't.
Yes, go
I'm not
Yes.
understanding. Oh,
ahead.
you are.
Asking if she
I'm
can
not
say
hearing
one.
her clearly. Sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to say it since Aisha talked about identity, like that beautiful description of identity being, being deep and infinite. And I wanted to say, and that, but now that you're talking about culture, I think it's a good time to say it, that what's about culture, right? And we're talking cultures around the world, everybody's culture, as in
Yes.
what belongs to their group, right? Or, and identity in that sense was the lens through which we were able to see and access the infinite and the ineffable. Um, so what if at the core this is who we are? We come from the source, like Aisha said, right? But culture and identity and tradition and rituals enable us to look at it and access it in a particular way. And of course, different people will access those things through different rituals and different ways, different myths, stories,
Right.
etc. Um, and I wanted to pull that out because that makes our culture so much more important to us, right? Because what it means is that it's the way that our ancestors have been able to access. And we mentioned that as well when I just talked about the pain and the trauma and the fact that they survived and they had to dig deep, right? They use culture and tradition and knowledge and stories and songs and
Mm,
dance to access that deeper infinite source. But I just wanted to bring that. I just wanted to sort of tie that in, like
mhm.
this is the way that they did it, and these things are accessible to us. These things are, are here
Right.
in the now. And we can use those things, you know,
Mm,
uh, to reach and touch the divine. So I just wanted to say that.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for making that point, Ruth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. All
And to
right.
not be afraid of ourselves, and who we are and that power that is there for us. I think that's one of the things we have to work on.
Mm. You know,
Yeah.
I was reading something else the other day, and in the introduction of the piece, the author asked the readers to do an exercise of breathing in what we need and exhaling what we don't need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So inhaling what we really need, filling the space within us where there's gaps, right? Or where there's pain or there's discomfort or there's confusion or uncertainty, right? And then exhaling those things. So exhaling the uncertainty, un- exhaling the discomfort because it doesn't do us well, right? It doesn't fill us. It doesn't make us feel whole. Um, so Erica, maybe we could do one more exercise,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then we can move on. So that could be our way
So,
of closing our discussion.
yeah.
Hmm, this was awesome.
So inviting us in, awesome sauce, as
Oh yeah.
somebody says. But giving thanks for us here, for Janelle for leading this conversation, for Sean, Ruth, Aisha for sharing so deeply, and honoring the courage and the openness to share because it takes something to share. So as we close, we thank the ancestors for being with us. And I invite us to take a deep breath in through the nose, breathing in all that we know we need, and breathing out what doesn't work for us. We're going to do two more like that. Breathing in deeply, all that we need, And breathing out, releasing what is not working for us. One more, breathing in deeply and breathing out. Giving thanks always. Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe.